Hello, everyone. This is Mike once again, bringing to you another interpretive guide to a pretty cool book that just came out, 2019, a couple months ago, actually. So this is from the book called Language and Neoliberal Governmentality. And the chapter is called The Self-Made Speaker, the Neoliberal Governance of Speakers. All right, let's talk about it. So from what I understand of the literature, a lot of it frames the university as kind of succumbing to this external force or economic policy called neoliberalism. So there's something global about this force that universities are pressured to accept. But you know, the university is itself a global enterprise, and I might add, a colonial enterprise. So perhaps we got to start looking at the way universities are complicit in the dissemination of neoliberal discourse. Sounds like it makes sense. So, language has become increasingly conceptualized as a potential economic resource or an asset, or importantly here, valuable in a way that gives a competitive edge to students or soon-to-be workers that must compete in a global marketplace. So becoming competitive can become or comes to be perceived as valuable in itself. So we've heard of this like idealized self-made man. Yes, man. So this entrepreneurial subject that is maximally responsible for their own success or failure, always working on themselves and their businesses and their assets, and understands the logic of competition within a market rationality, right? So this chapter proposes a linguistic correlate to this idea, which the author calls the self-made speaker. So this is a form of subjectivity and a subject position that emerges as an ideal within a neoliberal rationality. So what is this neoliberal form of governance? So this article shows you, or this chapter shows you how and when we see it to emerge. So this was about students governing their own behavior within a very narrow range of behaviors acceptable to the marketplace, so that then they can stake a claim to this idea of self-madeness. Or to phrase it differently, to appear as a legible neoliberal subject that has taken full advantage of the freedom to exist within a very narrow set of parameters that are then legible as success in the marketplace. So here we see students putting the model of an entrepreneurial self into practice at a university. So in many ways, the university is teaching students how to be competitive subjects. And disseminating market logics into the idea of what a person should be or what a person should aspire to be. So this is the idea of a competitive global worker, which then the university can point to. They can point to the production of these neoliberal subjects as success, and indeed project itself as a producer of the global market, as a producer of competition itself. Now, as we see, this governing rationality seems to make sense or connects a number of different scales: global, institutional, individual. When it makes sense like that, it tends to have a normalizing effect. That's then believed to be simply truth. This is the truth of normalcy. So these parameters emerge of what is normal or what is acceptable behavior, which reproduces itself through the conduct of individuals. What the authors describe as a spiral of self-training. That's a nice phrase. And this article focuses on how the lexicon of enterprise, the language of enterprise, the language of a neoliberal rationality gets shot through a variety of experiences that are then narrated in ways that produce forms of a subjectivity acceptable to the neoliberal marketplace. In this case, we get a focus on this idea of the self-made speaker. So this article, chapter. So in this chapter, the author first connects the university to a global and a local context, and shows how, like, for example, university brochures align with this neoliberal rationality, aligns with the language of neoliberal rationality. Then, and the most interesting part, I think, and the most powerful data, she looks at what the students say and how this aligns with a neoliberal rationality. And time again, we see this cost-benefit analysis of or students predicting how acquiring an additional language will then open up new possibilities for them. So notice here, when language is viewed as an economic object that can be added to a person's value, that quantification can then be projected onto other things. More languages means more jobs, means more traveling. So language learning under a neoliberal rationality is seen as not only something desirable, but something that a moral person does, that is to invest in yourself for the opportunity to have more jobs, to travel more, right? So in these moments, though, we see something a little different, which is important because neoliberal rationality is not adopted in any uniform way. It does not end with the rational actor making rational, self-interested choices. In fact, some of these students seem to kind of distance themselves from this idea in the section that talks about performance and pleasure. The last paragraph of this section kind of sums up really nicely while this idea of pleasure, while also illustrating this other idea of a spiral of self-training. So it reads, this is a quote, "It seems that the endless process of learning and capitalizing personal attributes, self-capitalization, is not just about exertion, rather it is a process of finding satisfaction in improving one's self. Thus, self-pleasure is achieved through the requisite performance. The self-entrepreneur is a being made to succeed, made to win, and he or she is expected to enjoy it." So notice how even success and winning and what you do with that success is actually part of the neoliberal governance. Now in the next section, the author goes over a bunch of potential technologies of power that are shot through every context, albeit in different degrees, because remember, neoliberal rationality, it adapts to a variety of situations, it adapts to a variety of populations. So some will experience more surveillance. Some will be asked to account for their abilities more often. Importantly, eventually, these power techniques become self-exercised. So we need to look at how, when, and why the language of enterprise how it's being widely adopted, how it's being widely adapted, because as the author notes in a powerful line, language is one of the most effective means of domination. So, I hope I gave you all a running start into this chapter. If you liked it, please do hit the like button because it helps my videos surface a little more on this YouTube monster. As usual, follow me on Twitter and academia. If all goes right, I'll have an article really soon on neoliberalism and higher education. And of course, because it's me, it will have a racialization component. So, I'm Mike once again. I'll see you around.